and we've been training and piloting them. And those guidelines are about to be issued by DPME. And just to give you a feeling, what's in the climate and ecosystems health criterion is, in terms of climate health, we need global temperatures returning to safe levels and regenerated carbon sinks. And we need to try and build ecosystems health, which is the capacity of ecosystems to remain stable, sustainable, and resilient. And when we look at all the things that we're doing, we need to understand how they influence climate and ecosystems health. Are they degenerative, which is our current model? We take lots of resources, we make, we use, and then we throw away and create lots of pollution. Are they neutral, just limited efforts to green the current system? Or are they actually regenerative, where they actually contribute towards mitigation and regeneration? And the dimensions we've got in the criteria is, what impact does the intervention have on climate and ecosystems health? What's the impact of the breakdown of climate and ecosystems on the intervention? For example, if there are floods, or there's storms, or there's fire, how's that going to affect your intervention? And what's the capacity of the intervention to adapt? And this is the dimensions as it's actually in the guideline, but I'm not going to go through those. And we've also got a set of principles for evaluation, that we need to apply systems thinking. We need to understand the interrelated systems within which the intervention operates and influences. We need to be adaptable to account for the breakdown that's happening. We need to be prepared to address the systemic transformations needed. We need to find ways to integrate regenerative and restorative practices into the intervention and the evaluation itself. We need to think how we build an educative component into the intervention. I'm seeing this talk to you now as an educative intervention to try and hopefully raise your awareness about the problem and what we can do. To identify both negative and positive consequences of the intervention. To explore the unintended impacts or consequences of the intervention that relate to the climate and ecosystems. And a big issue is around power, because it's the power of vested interests, whether at local level or national level or provincial level, that is stopping us moving. So we need to understand how that power is being played out. And when we come to actually applying the guidelines, first question is, what does this mean for the purpose of the evaluation? Do we need to refine the purpose? If there's an intervention which is quite closely linked to climate ecosystems or equity, we might need to actually change the purpose of the evaluation to take this into account. And I'll talk about that in a minute. Do we need to change the scope of the evaluation? Do we need to adjust the evaluative questions to take on these things? Do we need to adapt the design and methodology? Does it mean we need to reconsider the resources for the evaluation? What does it mean for the way we manage and we use the evaluations? And I'm going to just run through one or two of those now to give you a feeling for practically what we could be doing. And when we do this, one of the things I've raised with Marty actually is whether KZN would be interested in partnering with Samir and DPME on trying to pilot this and see how we can apply it. So we could be making adjustments to the overall purpose of the evaluation. So if we take the original terms of reference of the National School Nutrition Programme, the main purpose of the evaluation is to assess whether the NSNPs are being implemented in a way that is likely to result in significant health and educational benefits to primary school learners. If we add equity, we could say notably for poorest schools and the most vulnerable learners. And if we added climate and ecosystems issues to the purpose, we could say, and whether it could be implemented in a way that maximizes the benefits to and reduces the negative impacts on climate and ecosystems health. So we can adjust the purpose of the evaluation to take these issues into consideration. And we can adjust the evaluation questions. And in the guideline, we have a set of questions for each type of evaluation. We talk about the diagnostic evaluation, the design evaluation, the implementation evaluation, the impact evaluation, etc., and say, what are the questions? So here, and you'll see in the, I'm not going to go through them now, but you can see if we take the National School Nutrition Program left, and on the right are what the modifications that we could make to these. So if I just take the second one, are operational procedures effective to ensure the timely delivery of food? We might add to minimize resource use and waste, both emissions, food waste, plastic, water, energy, etc. These are just suggestions for the types of questions you could think about, and for each evaluation you'll need to think separately. And then you need to think about how you manage the evaluation. Who do we need to involve in the steering committee? Maybe there are people that are being affected in some way by pollution, for example, that we should bring into the steering committee. How can we minimize resource consumption? How can we make sure that in the improvement plan, this includes issues of equity and climate and ecosystems health? And in terms of you, us, what can we do to change our paradigm of the world, moving beyond materialism in our actions, in our lifestyle? How can we begin to recognize and start thinking in systems with a focus on humanity as part of nature, not apart from and exploiting nature? How can we include climate and ecosystems in our monitoring and evaluation practice and in all our evaluations? And how can we build adaptation and resilience into all our interventions, both work, but also our home ones? We need to start thinking about how we do that for our families, for our social networks. And I was just on a talk yesterday, and somebody from Bangladesh talked about what they're doing in Bangladesh. Bangladesh is a very low-lying country, 170 million people, very liable to floods. They are now spending, so you can see over the past 50 years, it's reduced cyclone-related deaths 100-fold. 100-fold. They are now spending 8% of their national budget on climate change, and apparently they've made a big impact on their vulnerability. They're reducing their vulnerability a lot. And I just want to end with the Secretary General. Okay, no sound?
And this is not fiction.
And historic investments in fossil fuels were cheaper, renewable.
Thank you very much, Ian. Can't stop the waves, but you can learn to surf. And in learning to surf, Colleagues, I don't know if any of you have tried to be on a surfboard. You have to be able to balance. So again, we will allow discussion after the next session. So thank you very much for that. I think there's quite a bit of food for thought that has come out. Top 10% is us. Top 10% is us. We need to make the difference. Leading on to that, we have got our lead geographer and environmentalist from our Provincial Planning Commission, Prof. Urmila Bob. And for that one, I'm not owing you a lint because I'm introducing you. Urmila's got this rule. If you refer to her as Prof, you owe her a lint chocolate. So, Urmila, there's a lot of people here that today I'm sure they're going to owe you some lint chocolate. So, Urmila, as you can see, colleagues, on the program, she's really coming to discuss with us evaluation and research for evidence-based decision-making. Urmila, I'm not going to waste a lot of time. Your profile is in the booklet, and I know that we are in for quite an exciting run. Colleagues, we're running slightly behind. Let us not panic. What we will do is we will have a working tea. So we will break and then come back for the discussion once we've had Urmila's input, if that is okay with everybody. Okay. Thanks, Urmila.
Good morning, colleagues. And while we set up with the presentation, you can call me Prof if you so desire, as long as you become a master's or PhD student of mine. How's that for a deal? So, yes, so that's that. While the presentation is being set up, let me perhaps just introduce the topic or the area of the presentation. I've had the privilege of working closely in the province now for a number of years and engaging with many of you. And for my sins, I've been asked to talk about evaluation and research for evidence-based decision making. I think when Futi and Marty and other colleagues chose me, they do so because they know I'm going to give it a completely different spin, because they always force me to think outside of the box. In fact, we do so all the time with each another. I'm part of the Provincial Evaluation Steering Committee, so I'm very, very close to what is being done, why it is being done, and how far we've come over the years, and your collective efforts to ensure that we go beyond simply doing evaluation for reporting purposes. And I think that is Marty's. Can I? Yeah. Is my skin being shared and all of those technical things? You can see I'm not somebody who likes being interrupted a lot. It is? Don't worry about me. Everybody knows how I look. Just make sure the presentation. Yep. Now we share. Go to that and go there. And I think you've got to unmute if you want people to hear me. Yeah.
No, you've got to be muted.
Okay, thank you, colleagues. So we're going to start off, I'm going to just get into it because the rationale is for us to just go through a journey of critically thinking about evidence-based decision-making in the context of evaluation and research. And I think we all know why evidence-based decision-making is important. We embrace it, we're very passionate about it, we go after all this data, and we want to be able to justify the decisions or the recommendations we are making. And in many ways, the simple understanding of evidence-based decision-making is the systematic and rigorous approach to data analysis. We focus on objective and reliable evidence that will tell us about performance, about whether we are achieving better outcomes, and how we should use the information to make decisions and to prioritize where we have perhaps limited resources to do so. It is also about understanding the cycle of evaluation and research. So we look at the evidence not only in the end when we're assessing the indicators, etc., but from the start of how we're formulating the problem, why we're undertaking the research or evaluation, how are we phrasing the questions, what types of evidence are we going to look for, which is the research design or the methodology we are adopting, and how we're going to apply it. There's also a focus on empirical evidence, something that is factual, that we can see, oftentimes quantitative in nature, derived from experiments, statistically significant surveys, observation, and even when we are bold enough to talk about qualitative evidence, we also want to confine it to our thinking of what constitutes science and subject it to that. Is it relevant? Is it reliable? Is it valid? Is it ethical? Is it unbiased? And many of you would probably have heard of the term SMART indicators as well. Things that are measurable, are specific, are time-bound. So you start to get a sense of the language of evidence. There is transparency, so what you collect, if I subject it to the same data collection process, the results will be the same. So very, very scientific discourse, often undertaken by these multidisciplinary teams, because the problems are complex. Thanks to Ian's presentation, you have a good example of the big, big challenge in the world that we need to come together to deal with. We need to collaborate, we have to have these experts, these multidisciplinary fields. We also believe that it's not linear, it's not a start, it's not an end. A lot of time, evaluations were seen and research as deemed to be project orientated. And the nature of project is you have a start and you have an end. But that's not how it happens anymore. It's cyclical. The information derived from evidence-based decision-making feeds back into the system, and we make better decisions, and we go again, learning, subjected it to analysis, and we bring in as many stakeholders as possible so we get the issues right from the beginning. Now, I've highlighted these words and this terminology to raise one important aspect with you, is none of this is not contested. Who the experts are, what is valid questions to ask, what type of data is important. We live in a world now where even statistics is contested. Who collects knowledge? For what purposes? How is it presented? How do we selectively pose the question? So it is a very, very muddy space. Ian and I happen to be on the International Evaluation Academy, and one of the agendas we are pushing is transformation and decolonization. And when you use the lens of Afrocentricity, you will also realize that this is a highly Eurocentric agenda. And that is the reason why we need to start asking the questions about what exactly are we doing? What evidence is there? Whose narrative is it telling? Whose voices is it highlighting and perhaps even discarding? How do we choose the experts? And in the end, I'm going to come to the world is so rapidly changing that the experts are no longer those of us with the titles. You see things happening that if you don't prepare for it, you're going to be left behind quite rapidly. So now that I've depressed you, which I always start off with, hopefully it won't continue for the next 20 minutes or so, I also just thought I should share with you the logic, however, of what we do remains. Right? We understand the problem, there's an intervention, the purpose of evaluation, the inquiring nature of what we do, how we set it up, right up to implementation and then monitoring and evaluating the impacts, whether it is we want to know day-to-day or the broader impacts in relation to the context of the theory of change. That logic remains. This particular slide is there's a lot of details. You will have access to the presentation, but although it's used in the context of health management, it is applicable really to a lot of the work we do. But the logic remains in how we do evaluation and the approach that we usually take. So we know now that it is important to do evidence-based or to do evaluation and research to drive evidence-based decision-making, and there are certain well-founded justifications for it. Firstly, it improves quality of the decisions we make. It limits or reduces errors and biases and uncertainty, but you must be aware that there are bias and uncertainty which you need to deal with. If you're not aware of it, then you're unlikely to put in systems and approaches to deal with those biases. And the credibility and reliability of the information becomes self-evident. And that is where you can win politicians over. You can get buy-in from stakeholders when you present information that is credible, reliable, and robust. You also increase transparency and accountability, because one of the value of evidence is what you see, I see, and we can subject it to analysis. Of course, knowing that you and I may see exactly the same data set, but we will interpret it differently. That we can come to different conclusions, different understanding, because the interpretation of data, and that's the reason why a lot of scientists will say facts lie, good facts can lie very well, because you can actually manipulate it to say what you want to say. And so that's where contestation takes place, which we must embrace. For those of us who are in the academic sphere, when we're training, particularly postgraduate students, we actually tell them, when you look at the results and you can't come to one single simple understanding, we get excited. Those papers are publishable because you're going to contribute to knowledge. Even if the data doesn't even give you an answer, but it leads to more questions, you must be willing to embrace that. And persons or communities of practice that is using the evaluation need to understand that. Because if you're looking for answers all the time, then the value of good research and evaluation is reduced. It is complete. Then you can use, and I'm going to come to that, you can use ChatGPT to give you an answer. It'll write something for you. So the notion that the transparencies and accountability is to the willingness to bring in people with differing perspectives, differing agendas, different stakes and interests, to subject the same evidence to different types of assessments and analysis, and to look at it in very critical ways. And that's the value of this type of thinking. The optimal use of resources becomes key. Because when we look at evidence-based decision-making and we have good data acknowledgement systems that underpin this type of evaluation and research, then what you do is you do not have to constantly being collecting data, because you know where it is, you can share it, you can access it easily. And part of South Africa's problem, actually, I feel, is that we duplicate and we replicate so many studies, because you don't know what somebody else has done. And this gatekeeping of knowledge and information really, really needs to change dramatically in the open access world we live in, particularly when government or public funding is used to collect the data. And as universities, we are being forced really to be told, if government supported you collecting the data, it must be available to anybody and everybody. So that's the interest of open access data. I won't go much into it, but it's the thinking behind it. And then, of course, continuous learning and improvement. However, please note, colleagues, that this world we live in this world of evaluation, it is not a linear process. It's an iterative process, which means you may even conceptualize the evaluation process, identify the indicators, do the log frame and all these wonderful things we've been trained to technically do. But during the process, you can actually come to the conclusion that that indicator is not useful. I can't collect data on it. And if I keep it, it's because I'm too scared to tell the powers that be that this indicator is not useful. I'm thumb-sucking the information, which we'll come to in a moment. I'll give you whatever you want because we have very few tools to validate and verify. Much of the work we do, the evidence we collect, is based on self-reporting. Some government official or some scientist or somebody somewhere is giving us this information which we take as the Holy Grail, and we do not subject it to independent verification, which undermines the principle of independent evaluation. Because you're supposed to be a bit away from it so you can engage critically in the process. So iterative simply means you go back and forth and you change. You don't start at point A and go to point B without maybe stopping, taking a detour. There's some traffic and you're like, maybe the GPS will take you in a different route. So you're constantly embracing change in a world that's constantly changing as well. Now, this is the simple evaluation process, right? We define the program's goals and objectives, we develop the plan, we collect and analyze the data, we use the evidence to make decisions, we communicate findings and decisions to various stakeholders, particularly those who have the power to make decisions, and we even subject the evaluation itself to evaluation. Are you embedding the recommendations? Are you using it for improved decision making? And that's where you'll get a bit irritated with Futhi and gang, because you think you've finished. You did the evaluation, and there they come in and say, where's your implementation plan? Where's your improvement plans based on the evaluation? Because otherwise, it could be constituted as a wasteful expenditure. You did something that doesn't change anything or doesn't impact on anything. Now, we are striving to do these things well. We're not doing it well. We're striving to do it well. For example, we barely communicate decisions. They stay in a report somewhere. Right? We fail to look at whether the recommendations are being implemented. And it's very possible that they won't be implemented because the recommendations, remember, come from a particular group undertaking a particular research design and a particular thinking about the evaluation. You may have recommendations that are not relevant to your department, or you can't implement because you don't have the resources, but there must be reasoning behind why you're doing certain things and why you're not doing certain things. So here are some of the major challenges you are likely to face when you are undertaking this type of evaluation and research. And to start off with, the evidence itself is very, very problematic in the South African context, and I suspect in many contexts, where we have difficulty in obtaining reliable and credible information. So you're constantly striving to do this. It might be linked to limited resources to do good research, because I can tell you as a professor that good research requires good resources. I didn't say money, I said resources, which I think has already been well explained by Marty. The data availability and quality, so even when it does exist, is it accessible to those of you who need it? And even then, as a good evaluator, you have to start asking yourself, how was this data collected? What was the limitations in that research design? What caution should I exercise when using the information? That's the questions about quality, especially when it's not primary data collection. Because primary data collection, you have better control over the quality. We also live in a world of information explosion. Who would think that would ever be a problem? You have so much information. You don't know what to use. And you use everything. And I keep telling, when I teach monitoring and evaluation, especially development of indicator frameworks, I tell people, please understand what indicator is. It's something that is indicative of what is happening. You don't have to have the laundry list. You don't have every indicator possible. You have to, and choosing which indicator is the skill itself. Because you choose that is best suited to tell you most about, and of course, linked to availability and quality. We also, as I said, we tend to rely on what we perceive to be factual, objective information, which biases it towards quantitative data. And the problem, colleagues, with quantitative data, I'm a quantitative specialist primarily, although I do some mixed methods. The problem with quantitative data, remember, is it tells you about trends and generalization. It often lacks the ability to probe and give you depth to make better decisions. And that's the reason why many people use mixed methods approaches. So to address this, from the beginning, have clear purpose and reasons for what you're doing, why you're doing it, and what do you want to achieve. And the DPME, and thanks to the efforts of colleagues like Ian and others for decades, those templates, those guidelines, they're there. You don't need to reinvent the wheel. They are there about how we go about developing good evaluation plans and frameworks. From the beginning, think about the budgeting and the resource requirements. Because you can't be in it and know you don't have the money, and it undermines the quality of the entire process. Have clear indicators. Think about, am I going to aggregate data? Am I going to disaggregate the data? What is that data set going to look like when you want all the municipalities to give you the same information, but their understanding of gender is different? You think it's male, female, they think it's something else. They might bring in sexual orientation. Now you've got data sets that don't talk to each other. So from the beginning, you have to understand, especially when it's multiple data sources, what are the likely challenges and how do you communicate with the data collectors and users so that there's clarity, definitional clarity from the beginning. Otherwise, you have a lot of data you can't use. Garbage in, garbage out. That's the simple research philosophy. Develop your knowledge management systems so that information is there. Because once you have robust data management system, it allows you over time to do better evaluation, tracer studies, longitudinal monitoring. That doesn't happen if you're sitting with discrete data sources. And always apply with ethical protocols. Doesn't matter where you are and who you are. Evaluation and research must be done with research integrity and meeting ethical requirements. By the way, it's law. It's not me screaming at you. You have to do it, right? Challenge the balancing of complexity, because often you also have conflicting evidence. You have one person telling you that, the data telling you something, somebody, how do you deal with that? That's the nature of the complex world that we live in. And that's why even facts nowadays seem to be contested. How do you deal with this? You map out the complexities and the stakeholders. You anticipate that there will be divergent thinking and views, which is what you must appreciate and understand in a diverse society which we live in. Consider and integrate in evaluation design and embrace triangulation and complexity thinking. That's why we use mixed methods, deliberately to have different sources of information challenge each another. And among that challenging information, you get a better picture of what is going on, particularly socioeconomic and environmental problems. You can't understand them as you do in a lab. You do an experiment, you get an answer, X plus Y will whatever. That's not how the world we live in and do evaluations work. Even in that world also, things can get very muddy. One aspect, and that's why we are here, and that's why the seminar is structured the way it is also capacity and capabilities. So capacity is you can have 10 evaluators in your division. Capability is, do they have the skills? Right? So having warm bodies does not necessarily imply that you have the skills. And this could be lack of personnel, limited skills, which requires more people or more training, reskilling, upskilling, etc., because we live in a world that what you know today might not be relevant tomorrow, maybe outdated, but you still working with your same JD and performance KPIs and all of those things. That's a bizarre world we live in. Political and social pressures. So you could be forced to tell a story that the evidence is not leading to. That speaks to your own personal integrity and ethics. The professionalism is central. We need, especially for those of us in the evaluation space, we have to focus on protecting that independence and the professionalism. We can't, and remember, I can do one whole presentation, by the way, on how you can crook and manipulate information. And one important way of manipulating is to discard information that is not conforming to the story you want to tell. You just ignore it. You simply ignore it. And we really can't do that. And you have to have buy-in. You have to develop this culture of ethical research and evaluation that is done with high levels of professionalism and interpretation. and integrity, sorry. We spoke about interpreting and communicating the information, and we must develop not only appropriate protocols, but we must understand the different role players. Not everybody is going to read my 100-page report. You have to synthesize it, the policy briefs and all of those things. Some government departments now simply want things in a PowerPoint presentation. I'm not going to read all your references and all. Just tell me what the issues are, what's your analysis, what do you want me to do about it? They don't want, so you have to understand your audiences. Who are you targeting? Because if you can't translate the information into a user format, you will not inform decisions. You would have just ticked the box, you've done your KPA, and you've moved on, earned the salary at the end of the month, but it hasn't done much. Feedback mechanisms to inform decision-making. We've got to go beyond this reporting. In meetings, send it to everybody and assume everybody has read it, etc. We have to think about awareness and communication strategies that are agile and impactful, and especially targeting the different groups as I have thought about. So in my last few minutes, as if it's not a complex environment, as if Ian hasn't given you this big, complex environment. And now I'm saying, even in what we do in our little spaces in evaluation, it's complicated, the words we use. We are in a rapidly changing world. The future of evaluation we don't even know what it's going to be like. Because we are dealing with artificial intelligence, disruptions that Ian has spoken about. Those disruptions are tangible, we can see it. There are some disruptions that are happening that you don't even know what it is about. There's complex models, there's multiple variables. There are going to be things that we cannot reduce to an indicator. We cannot, the log frame, all of those things, they will not apply in a complex world. And we thought we had it, right? But things have just changed. The complexity of scenario thinking and extrapolation in a world of big data analytics. There is so much of information that even physicists and astrophysicists now don't know how to deal with it. They're developing their algorithms, etc. In this changing world, whose voices are going to count? Whose experiences and perceptions are going to count when we are dealing with new ways of learning, thinking, and doing, when some of us are already left behind? Even in the world of simple smartphones, and we haven't been able to deal with things like internet connectivity. More than 50% of South Africa's population do not have reliable internet connectivity. So all this data, information available is not available for the majority of society. Evaluation is no longer the domain of experts. In a world of big data analytics, the 22-year-old hacker who is sick and tired of what we've been doing that is they see no future, will be able to engage with your own information and expose our inability to do things. It's a different type of evaluation. Look at the social media, look at even the little we know, how different voices are coming in that probably are better placed to inform some of the work that we are doing. These youngsters are not even getting degrees. My own son told me, "You outdated, Mom. There's no need for you. It's a good thing you're close to retirement, because you would be unemployed." Because that's how AI and machine learning, and by the way, when numerous people in this AI space were asked, would we need lawyers? Would we need educators? Would we need evaluators? And the answers are consistent and simple. Evaluators who do not use or understand AI will no longer be needed. Those who understand and are able to use it, engage with it, will not only have work, but they will be able to do their work better, probably even earn more, command a higher salary. So the choices are here. Do we just go and say, oh, I don't like it, it's unethical, the chat GPT and all? If you don't know what chat GPT, which is a free software by now, you're really so far behind that maybe this evening go and download it and at least play around with it. Even if you don't like it, you need to understand what things do in the world. And of course, this notion of a rationality trap, right, is being challenged. That if we just do things in a rational way, if we just follow the steps of doing this, and Ian, I'm going to pick on you, so rapid evaluation. Ian is going to tell us, do this, this, and you did it. Those things are going to change dramatically in the next few years. You'll still follow the logic, but you need to know it's no longer linear, and anything can happen at any time. So here's the world we live in, right? We do research and evaluation because we want to understand and prepare for this future, and hopefully do things that will make things better. And scenario and predictability thinking and all of this extrapolation was usually, the modeling was you have a best case, you have a worst case. Hopefully you'll have somewhere in between and closer to the best case rather than the worst case. But here's the world we live in. Ian and I didn't do the presentations together, but here at the center is these disruptions, climate change, technology, etc. What we also know about this reality in the future is that we thought we were creating the future. The things we do now will result in this future. Here's what complexity thinking and chaos thinking has brought to the fore, that there's this future coming towards us, whether you're ready or not. And there's no one future. There's multiple scenarios. It's unpredictable. It's just muddy. And Ian spoke about tipping points. There's things like wild cards and all kinds of things that are going to happen. Assumptions, technologies, environments, they're constantly changing. And the future is no longer based on extrapolations of the past. So if we understand trends, then we can predict what's going to happen in the future. There are things that will change. For example, if somebody in somewhere, a young person, figures out, well, it doesn't have to be young, can be any age, but figures out how to take carbon dioxide and make it back into oxygen. In many ways, climate change will be something that we will can rethink the way we're going to deal with it. It's still going to be there, but and God knows what that will do, what change that will bring. So, what is required? Improved data collection, real-time dashboard monitoring, predictive analytics, but not projections. You must anticipate this future that you're shaping, but is being shaped even while we're sleeping. Right? Increased use of natural language processing, multiple data sources, visualization, dissemination, everything is rapidly changing. And believe you me, artificial intelligence, you want a policy brief, put the policy into a chat GPT and say, please do a policy brief. It will do it for you. That doesn't mean to say that you now don't have to look at it and understand the KZN context and all of those kind of things. But that's how rapid the world we're looking at. So, here's this muddiness, right, that we are talking about. There is artificial intelligence that can, if you tell it to do something, it will do it. And there's some of it that is thinking way beyond the little you know as an individual. And there's some of it that will think for itself. So this 4IR is now a thing of the past. We are beyond the 4IR. It can test focus group. It can do really anything. So my parting comment is, in this complex world, given the resources we have, given the needs we have, and given the future we want to shape, what can we do now to prepare for this future so that people are better off than they are today, especially those who are likely to be left behind if we don't watch the space sufficiently? Thank you so much, colleagues.
The passion. But I very quickly picked up for us as we move towards grabbing a cup of tea and coming back, because time is our enemy. But colleagues, this was so rich that I think my co-program director would agree with me. There was just no ways we could cut on this. But a capable, ethical, developmental state requires us to have professional, ethical, progressive researchers and evaluators. I think I'm really hearing that coming through in many ways. So let us have a quick break. Bring your cups. Can we do it 10 minutes? Yeah, 10 minutes? And then we'll allow for a little bit of discussion, points of clarity. I've seen people taking vigorous notes, as opposed to clearly they have not embraced technology yet. Urmila, I haven't seen lots of people typing the notes, but we will get there. Because Urmila said to us, if you haven't done ChatGPT yet, then sorry, you are out of date. So colleagues, let's get into the mode. Please let us go and grab a cup of tea and be back in about 10 minutes' time. Okay, thank you very much. Colleagues, if we can please come inside, bring our cups. Hi, Antonio. Good, good. I'm going to ask Ian and Urmila to come up to the stage. I'm sure you've got questions. Let's spread the love, herd in the lost souls that are still enjoying their coffee to bring it inside. Okay. Ian has gone missing in action. I think maybe he's gone to go and catch a wave quickly. It is Durban, it's Umhlanga. I don't know, eThekwini colleagues will tell us what the water quality is like now. Is it good? It's safe. But just don't open your mouth. Okay. With your mouth open. You've been. Okay, so Manalisi is telling us it's all safe to go and swim. He's been there. He's got his surf here ready. Right, colleagues, I really would like us to go into the discussions. I think there's just a few pointers that we need to reflect on. The one is climate change is real. We are the ones who are contributing the most, not the them, us. And action is required urgently. But that action is a very complex problem, one that we can't just deal with in our own little silos. And it reminds me, Ian, my daughter is an ecologist, and I plant ecology in particular. And I asked her, I said, so what is the problem? She says, well, South Africans love red meat too much, and we feed our cattle grain. So I said, so what's the problem? Why are we feeding them grain? She says, because it fattens the cattle quicker. If we fed them grass, there would be lesser an effect. But here's the interesting thing. When we speak to people, they say we need to combat CO2. What's the first thing they tell you? What must you do? Plant trees. Trees is not the solution on its own. Because when you plant trees, you have more shade. When you have more shade, the types of grass that will grow is not sufficiently nutritious for the animals that feed off grass. It's little intricacies like that that we don't know, but when you start consulting with a broader community, they'll tell you, go and plant grass. The other one they're telling us is spekboom. What about spekboom? Yeah, and it's quite edible apparently. We don't listen to those things. We take this issue very, very lightly. And we take our profession, I think Urmila was saying to us, the people that have the answers are no longer the people with the titles. Because there's people out there with real practical experience that can tell you, just look at how beautiful our acacias are growing in KZN. Do you know it's actually a sign that we're losing healthy grassland systems? Scary. And then we wonder why we have issues around the ecology and ecosystems. So, colleagues, there's been some challenges that the speakers have given us. It's a complex world. Let us not think that the way we're going to evaluate and do research is going to remain the same. Principles will remain. I think I heard principles will remain, but yeah, it's going to be very interesting to see how some colleagues respond. Let's take a few hands, because they've had their talk. Now it's time for the audience. Manalisi, I'm going to give numbers because I don't know everybody's names and we don't want to have these huge name plaques on people. Okay, so it's number 1. See number 2. Is there a number 3? Number 3? Is there a number 4? Is number 4 hiding? There's number 4. Have you all got your numbers now? Don't start contesting numbers at this stage. Okay? The contestation on numbers you can have outside. So we've got 4 hands. Right, let us go to number 1. Manalisi.
Good morning, colleagues, and thanks to the presenters. Ian was trying to see me and he can't see me and I'm hiding behind this pillar. Maybe let me stand here. All right. The first one, Ian, I hear your presentation on climate change. And whilst we were presenting, I was saying, you know what, you are presenting a very important information to us. Sorry, but with me, I was saying, how do I then use this information as a municipal official? More so when you operate in an environment whereby you are having people abangenamans who don't have water for 7 days. People will be saying that, you know what, I don't have food on the table. And I made a joke with my colleague next to me. I said, hey, how do you look after the environment whilst you still have got your stomach to look after? And all that made me to think maybe you could advise to say, what's the message? How do we then address the challenges that you have highlighted? More so because in our plans as the city, you know, as municipal, as government, we like to comply. I'm sure every department, they've got environmental plans. And if you look in terms of meeting those environmental plan targets, they are all meeting their targets. So it might mean that our environmental plans that we're having are not really responding to the issues that you have raised. That's the first one to Ian. Then to Prof, sorry, you said we mustn't call you Prof, but I don't have a problem to be your master's student or a PhD student. Prof, again, I got concerned if by now we are still talking about this issue of evidence-based in this platform. Because you'll recall, colleagues, we have talked about this thing. Ian was a champion of this thing when he was a DDG or acting DDG at DPME. We even sent some decision makers to this evidence-based course. I thought at least by now we would have really progressed well in terms of using evidence in decision making. But it seems we are not moving in that regard, and it worries me. And whilst we are presenting, Prof, I even thought to say, are we the right platform? Are we the decision makers that really needed to be taught about evidence making? Because very soon, colleagues, you will see Umati and Foot after elections. They'll be developing a new provincial growth and development strategy. You don't even know what's the basis of that strategy. It's just one example. I don't even want to mention other examples from COGTA. This year, they'll talk about back to basics. Another year, they talk about 5-year LGSA. They change them. You don't know what's the evidence behind changing them. So it really concerns me, and maybe also the Premier, maybe also nationally, to say, if we're still talking about this now, and I've seen that it's not happening, colleagues. I'm not saying that it is happening. It's not happening. We take decisions as government officials, really without evidence. The last part that I want to comment on, you were quite right when you spoke about us being responsive. When I joined the city with my colleagues, I started to develop the municipal evaluation plan and framework. Within a month of developing that document, I realized that document is outdated. So we had to change how we do evaluations, but Ukuruli will present on that. Thanks very much.
Number 2. There's number 2.
Greetings, Nati, and greetings to our presenters. The name is Bongaleni Zwandi from India. No, mine is on Prof. Ian and also on Prof. Nina. The first one is, Prof. Ian, there are contradictions that exist in the world. And you know, I think I always get motivated when I hear ecologists speak about, you know, and actually it's preaching, when they preach about how close we are from being consumed by the universe. And I wish that we all can have the same zeal that ecologists have as far as ecology is concerned, because it's a serious matter and everybody must take it serious. But I want to speak about contradictions that exist, because remember that South Africa, a developing country, for a longest time, and I think we are still on the curriculum. If you look at the world economy, so we have the core and we have the peripheral. So we probably all on the receiving end of also that if you follow the history of the world, you realize that for most of the time, we were really on the receiving end of most of the things. So now when we are faced with the challenge of ecology, as we are stating it, it is hard to embrace it in a neutral manner, especially because for most of the time it will be coming from our colonizers to respond to these things. And also the geopolitical issues that are contested within there. So for example, if you look at South Africa as a country, we have triple challenges, which is unemployment, poverty, and inequality. And if government were to deal with issues, it will say how do we fight unemployment, how do we fight poverty, and less to think about the sustainability, but to say how can we quickly deal with what we are facing with. Now, the problem with poverty, is that when a person is poor, they're just thinking about how do I get my next meal. They're not thinking too far. They're thinking about how do I get my next meal. They are not thinking, poor people don't think about the issues of ecology. They think about how do I get my next meal. So my question becomes, how do we deal with those contradictions that exist? The country that we are, the challenges that we are faced with, but also dealing with the issues of challenges that we face. One example before I move to Prof. Imela is the issue of just transition. The consultation between the power generation. You have money that are being pumped into South Africa to change to the sustainable energy forms. But the countries who are on the coal are actually moving back to coal. Now, how are we convinced as a nation that we need to follow through and use sustainable energy, but also thinking about the issue of unemployment, that most of our guys, if you go to Mpumalanga, are sustained through coal and that type of energy. These are contradictions that really exist on the ground when we are talking about the issues of ecology. Prof. Omila, you spoke about the issue of power and social pressure. And for most people who are here, we are public servants and we are working in a very contested space. South Africa is a very contested country, and more so politically, and most of you saw what happened on Monday. It's part of the contestation that exists. And sometimes it's easy for us as public servants to find ourselves in the middle of that contestation. Because, for example, if I do an evaluation and it does not lean toward my bosses, that contest becomes even higher. So I might even be prompted to say, hey, Mr. Zondi, we don't like how you put this one. Because it's not pro us. Because of the contestation. So how do we deal with those issues in a more meaningful manner? Thank you very much.
Number 3.
Good morning, everyone. This is Maria Rathmana from KZN. My question is posed to Professor Goldman. First, thank you for rude awakening. The presentation, it gives much to think about, even from a personal perspective, not just looking at it holistically, but what impact each person has. So my question is relating to technology, and I think it's twofold. Number one, with us being in the energy space, we are essentially looking for ways to, for lack of a better phrase, change things, make things better. So in this rapidly evolving technological space, how then do we navigate thinking about the sustainability of things, whereas we also need the technology that is ever changing? Because I would think with the technology, there are resources that are being used to make up. I was just thinking about my devices myself. So in that space, how do we navigate that, thinking about the overall sustainability of things? And then secondly, I technology itself. Or rather, let me say, I'm asking this question because it has an impact on the outcomes of what we are maybe monitoring and evaluating, and what we then put forward to say that this is like this is a way that we can improve things. So that's the one part. And then secondly, I just wanted to hear from you, just from an interest perspective, what is the state of the resources when it comes to technology and just in general? Like, what's the state of their use overall and the impact that it is having on the environment? Thank you. Number 4.
Thank you very much for the presentations, Prof. My name is Gladys from Kokcha. I am tempted to ask whether we are the right disciples. And my colleagues have brought up a question around that. But in the main, I want to determine whether in your engagements with the province, Prof. Bob, and in your engagements, Prof. Jan, on the sort of the broader spectrum of evaluation, are you finding whether there's appetite to appreciate the recommendations that emanate from evaluation and research? Is there appetite to embrace made in Africa evaluation? With the last year floods, for instance, there were graves that were flooded. And with the honor and the closest space that we cherish our graves, when we develop such frameworks in Africa, are we embracing the fact that this rapid force to move with technology, to move with the times, is not leaving behind the people that we need to be advocating change for? And with making the outcomes of evaluation accessible, is there appetite really to, at the end of the day, influence change? How do we ensure that, how do we deal with the resistance within the powers that we as the people or the employees, how do we deal with the resistance to embrace the recommendations? Because we can come up with all these reports and adjust them to the audience, to the type of people that would not go through the long report. But at the end of the day, how do we ensure in our little spaces that these are appreciated and are contributing to change? Thank you.
Right, colleagues, those were the 4 questions. In the interest of time, we're only going to take those 4 and allow our, I'm so glad I don't have to respond to them, our experts to respond. Ian, we'll start with you because you started the process. Sorry, Urmila, this is one time where we're going to say gentlemen first. That's equitable, right?
Dominating on stage.
Okay, and then we will hand over to you for your comments.
So first of all, both Manalisi and Mr. Zondi, your question, there's a false dichotomy between ecology, if you like, or ecosystems and poverty. The problems of poverty and ecosystems crisis are caused by our economic system. And our economic system exploits people and it exploits nature to the benefit of a few. So as long as we continue with that, both things will be disrupted. We have to address both of them, which is why Samir is working with climate, ecosystems and equity. We're not seriously addressing equity. We need to seriously address equity. The problem is not from poor people. The problem is from rich people. Rich people are causing the problem. It's rich people's lifestyles that are the problem. We have to find ways to create more sustainable lifestyles for the 20% at the top of the pyramid in South Africa, so that the 80% at the bottom of the pyramid can get much better lives. So the two are interlinked. Manalisi, in relation to the plan, so we need to think about all the sort of issues. So for example, if we focus on roads, then usually we're focusing on rich people who have cars. If we focus on public transport, we're focusing on what benefits the majority of the people. We will never solve the problem through electric vehicles. We will solve it through public transport. We will have to have electric vehicles, it's part of this, but we must get public transport. We must get pedestrian. We must get cycle. That we've got to go for these types of things. So in the municipal planning, how are we thinking about those options? How are we thinking about waste? How are we thinking of trying to make sure we don't get waste in the first place? We use so much plastic which ends up in the oceans, and now I don't know if you know, but microplastics are now being absorbed. All of us are ingesting microplastics all the time. There's so much microplastics in the environment. It's just being absorbed through our gut into our bodies, and we don't know what effect that's going to have. Yeah? So we have to address the fundamental way we operate. Why do we need so in terms of technology, we need technology. Technology is very important. We can use technology to help solve the problems. The advances with solar panels, the advancements with wind energy have come from technology. But technology that is not in the service of people is just in the service of profit, which goes to the 1% again. So we need to be looking at why is it that robots are not taxed, but people are taxed? Yeah? We make choices. Why is it that the polluter won't necessarily be taxed, and yet the costs of the pollution come to the state to have to deal with? Yeah? Acid mine drainage is a huge problem in South Africa. The mine owners have got away scot-free. They've just gone bankrupt. They engineer it so they go bankrupt, so they then don't have to take the consequences. So it's up to us whether we deal with those people. Many of those people are very connected to politicians. There's a nexus there which we have to deal with. And without us facing up to these issues, we will not solve it. So technology is part of it, but at the same time, why do I need to upgrade my iPhone every year, or 2 years, or 3 years? It lasts for 6-10 years. We're being pushed to upgrade it by the manufacturers who want us to spend money. Why do I need to upgrade my computer every 3 years? It's doing fine. It'll carry on. Why do I need a car that has all these millions of functionalities that it can do? I could have a much simpler car, which would cost much less, and would perfectly do the job I need to do. We're being pushed to consume all the time. Fast fashion. We're being pushed to consume. We have to change that view that is a legitimate way of living in this world. It's not a legitimate way. It's a destructive way, which is destroying the planet. And lastly, Gladys. Yeah, no, just in terms of, so, evaluation, I mean, the interest in evidence goes in waves, and the waves are quite closely linked to political cycles. So at this particular point, with a year to go towards the elections, politicians are running scared. So they're not particularly at a state to be very receptive to evaluation findings. But having said that, we've got to do what we can, and we've got to try and be strategically opportunistic to try and find the politicians who are prepared to, and how we can express something that, if we do it this way, it'll be better in future, and you can then say that we promise that better future. So we have to be clever about the way we do things, so that we're expressing in the language that they will want to use, rather than just creating problems.
Thank you, colleagues. I think you can hear me. I was told it is on, so there you go. Can you hear me now? Great, thank you. So I just perhaps reinforce one or two things that Ian has said, and address some of the issues that we raised as well. The issue about making choices in respect of privatizing the environment, and then, or whether you prioritize the needs, particularly of the poor, which at least two, if not all, of our speakers raised. The one aspect that we need to understand really, really seriously, that when you do not pay attention to environmental impacts, over time you even worsen the plight of the poor to get out of poverty. And that's why if we seem as environmentalists, etc., to be pushing an environmental agenda, it's not necessarily an environmental agenda. I, for example, believe first and foremost that I'm a social activist, but I understand that the nature of livelihoods is that it is reliant, particularly in our context, on the natural resource base. Access to land, access to other types of resources, and dare I say, well, I am controversial, so I'll say it nevertheless, is sometimes it's an excuse for us not to act. It's an excuse to say we're taking care of people, but we're not taking care that well of people. Anyway, so let me put it out there. And perhaps we'll do a better job if we understand the intersections. I also do want to raise something that perhaps we need to pay attention to when we're dealing with environmental issues, is South Africa's mapping of renewable option is off the charts. There's very few countries in the world that has options of hydro, solar, you name the renewable energy source. We have it, yet we have not transitioned. And if you think about the discourse, especially in recent years, the fracking, the going more into coal-based energy sources to deal with the so-called load-shedding problem, I'm actually aghast as a scientist and as a person who knows that every wave that crashes on our beaches is untapped energy that we need to learn how to harness and use more effectively. Sorry, I have to get that out of my system. Now I'll go to be a more rational academic about the evidence-based aspects of the questions that you have asked. So here's the first thing. You are absolutely right. The reason why I think that the colleagues asked me to speak about evidence-based decision-making, and the slant I took was to problematize it, is because we think we're doing it, and we're doing it as a tick box exercise rather than understanding how complex it is and how badly we might be doing it. And that's probably, so I'm not going to try and get into the minds of politicians. I think I'll go insane doing it if we try to understand how politicians think. But I do want to say a couple of things, and perhaps the next presentation we should hear from is the Prof. Musha Moshobela, which we've been talking about. He happens also to be my boss. I'm not plugging him in just because he's my line manager currently. But just to say that the one thing that he does is the DVC research at KZN. So we are in as political spaces, so we understand where you come from. And he speaks about being persuasive, being influential, because you can't, he reminds me all the time, you know, you can scream and you can rant and rave, which I do very well, but you need to also embrace that often you have to be persuasive. And that's where we need to transition as evaluators. There are things we can change, and there are things, Marty it was in your prayer, Marty, that, you know, give us the wisdom to change the things we can and the courage to change the things we can. Whatever. So I think that's where it cannot be them and us. That's the gap, that's the bridge that we, I think, as the evaluation community can cross. That's where we can bring the players together. And perhaps the last point that I would like to make is this notion of made in Africa evaluations or solutions and things of that sort. And that is very critically a part of the decolonization agenda. But remember, there is not one Africa. We spoke about this homogenizing and tendencies. Within Africa, in the spaces we exist, there's contestation, and we must embrace it. We must encourage it. The challenge, which we dealt with yesterday, as early as yesterday, is how do we contest in constructive ways, rather than utilize avenues that can be destructive today and for the future generations to come. So for me, it's about centralizing sustainability in all its elements, environmental, social, economic, and governance, and all those other issues, but also being willing to transition and be willing to be champions of those transitions, even if it doesn't go anywhere. And I do want to say, however, that to act with integrity, to stand and tell your boss, I can't do it, the data does not lend itself to this type of analysis, is a professional and personal choice you make at that point. And that boldness is very few people, unfortunately, seem to have. Thank you.
Colleagues, before we give a round of applause, Ian, in typical fashion, this is Ian, has to have another bite. And he's come all the way from Cape Town. So we have to allow him that bite. Ian?
Okay, I just wanted to leave it, and it comes with this point about influencing. Don't believe that power lies with the leaders. The power lies with you. The only way we're going to make this future change is through collective action that's driven from the bottom up. It's not by abdicating to the people at the top. So that means the involvement of communities, and it means you all taking the initiative to say leadership starts with me.
Thanks for that, colleagues. Let's give them a round of applause. It does remind me, though, colleagues, it's the Serenity Queen.
Yes, it is, I know.
Give me the strength to change the things I can, the courage to accept those that I can't, and the wisdom to know the difference. And colleagues, let us hope that this session has given us the wisdom to, as we move forward, learn that difference. Colleagues, I am going to hand over to Ms. Gugu Shabangu. She is my colleague from the Office of the Premier and the stakeholder team. She's going to be driving the program from this point on. I will be back a little bit later to pop in and listen to the discussions. And keep up the debate, colleagues. We are going to have to manage our time a little bit more effectively, so we might have to cut a little bit of your lunch time without compromising the rich discussions that will be out there. Gugu, I'm going to hand over to you. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Nat. Let's give a very big round of applause. Thank you so much, and greetings to everyone. Thank you, Marty, for the wonderful job that you have done this morning. I'd like to greet the members of the Provincial Planning Committee, led by Prof. Bob, and Office of the Presidency, DPME, the municipalities that are amongst us, the research sector, departments that are here, the civil society, our social partners, Office of the Premier, and all of you. I want to greet you this morning in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen. Yeah, that's all that I know. Thank you very much for the opportunity that I'm given this morning to direct the program. If you look at time, we're doing well since the start of this morning. Unfortunately, we started with two very, very interesting topics. So we needed to give them time, but I'm hoping that as we move forward, much as the topics that are coming are also very important and interesting, but we are going to be observing time. So the time that is allocated for all the presenters, we are going to be sticking on that. And I will be reminding the presenters constantly so that at least we finish according to the program presenters. We are going to be moving with our program. The biography is in your program. So unfortunately, we're supposed to read that. Due to time factor, we just request that you go through that so that you familiarize yourself with our speakers as we are calling them in front to give us their presentations. But let us know who they are. They are there in your programs. So we'll now move to get a presentation on the National Evaluation Policy Framework. This will be delivered by Mr. Dinero Setwabi from the Department of Planning, Monitoring and Evaluation. Can you get that speaker in front? Can you also get our speaker in front, Dr. Ayabulela Tikavu, who is also going to be giving us a presentation. And also, I don't know how many chairs I have here. I think they can all come up. Ms. Jennifer Lawrence, if you can all come up from me. And also Ms. Meryl Lynn Taylor, also from ATIA, if we can all have our speakers in front, maybe hold there, and then the others will come after the discussions. Can we have all our speakers in front, please, in that order? I think I've called 1, 2, 3, 4. So I'm expecting 4. Oh, there we are. Thank you very much. I will now hand over to Mr. Dineko Setwabi from DPME. Over to you, sir. Thank you.
Okay, am I audible? Okay. Okay, let me take this opportunity and thank you, Program Director, and also thank the Program Director for the previous session. What an informative session which laid a very good foundation for the seminar as we continue with the program. Colleagues, let me also take this opportunity and greet you and congratulate the Office of the Premier, the evaluation units, for organizing yet another informative seminar. So I say kudos to you. Well, colleagues, as already indicated, my name is Dineko Setwaba, and I'm from the Department of Planning, Monitoring and Evaluation. So, colleagues, I don't know if it's okay. I'm going to be taking you through this presentation, which first seek to set the standard for what is required in implementing evaluations within the national evaluation system. And I must say that I am talking here just after the professor has really dwelled deeper into the nitty-gritties of evaluations. But what I will be doing, I will just be bringing us together as to what does the framework requires in terms of undertaking evaluation in government. And I will be also focusing on the two institutions or elements that have been added in the National Evaluation Policy Framework, which is the local government, the SOEs and SOCs, as to how do we go about institutionalizing evaluation in those spheres of government. So before we get into those, I will provide you with a bit of a background on the historic background of the NEPF in terms of where it lies within the government-wide monitoring and evaluation system. as well as the legislative framework that informs the NEPF and how or to which institution it actually applies, as well as the revision processes, because we currently are in the second version of the NEPF, so it's very important to understand where it comes from given the number of changes that have occurred. So colleagues, the NEPF or National Evaluation Policy Framework is just but one of the three data terrains of the government-wide monitoring and evaluation system. So it's one amongst frameworks such as the Framework for Strategic and Annual Performance Plans, which has also been revised, and that revision informed the current version that we are currently working on, as well as the Statistical Quality Assurance Framework, which provide guidance on how to go about producing statistics as we know it. Now, colleagues, the NEPF derive its mandate from various frameworks, or what you call legislative frameworks, which complement each other. And key to this is the Constitution, specifically Chapter 9 of the Constitution, specifically Section 195 of the Constitution, which looks into values and principles of equality as well as public administration. It also is informed by the Public Service Act of 1994, including the various amendments that speaks to that act, as well as the Public Finance Management Act of 1999. So now, colleagues, in terms of its applicability, the NEPF is applicable to all national and provincial spheres of government, as stated. And it is applicable to all institutions as provided for in Chapter 9 of the Constitution, including all components of the state as listed in Schedule 1, 2, and 3A of the Public Service Act, together with the PFMA. So, colleagues, often we are told, or we are made aware that the current version of the NEPF does not address how it could be implemented at the municipal level. But you would remember that the previous version also provided a legislative link or basis for implementing evaluations at local government through the Municipal Finance Management Act, which in this case, it is still a relevant legislation because it provides for the effective management of service delivery intervention. So we tend to say we are aware of that oversight, but it's still relevant to also apply in this instance. So now, as I've indicated, the NEPF has undergone a revision process, and I think it's key to note that the first version of the NEPF was adopted by Cabinet in November of 2011. And with that adoption, the Evaluation and Research Unit was established within the DPME as a unit tasked with the operationalization of the framework and ensuring that it is institutionalized within government. So what had happened is that prior to that, evaluations, yes, were undertaken in small scales by various institutions, but the challenge is that they were done in an ad hoc manner and emerged in different ways. And this was largely because there was no framework or a set of guiding standards that would provide some form of reference on how to carry evaluations out. So since then, we have seen the NEPF being implemented, as per the comment that was said earlier, that Prof. Yen was the one driving that process during that time. So the NEPF continued to provide guidance in terms of building the system, which is more formal and integrated, but with times there's been a lot of changes. Hence, it seems we're still singing the same chorus. We haven't changed, or we have not gone to the other verse of the chorus. So it's very important to reiterate these things, colleagues. And the NEPF, colleagues, was revised in 2019 and approved by Cabinet in 2020. Now the approach here is to continue in the same light, you know, to implement the NEPF, to provide a set of standards for evaluation across government, to promote quality evaluations for the purpose of learning and to measure the impact of government as at large. So it's important to note that with this revision, the local government as well as the SOEs and SOCs were brought into the cycle. So, colleagues, I want us to look at this slide which presents to you an adopted definition of what an evaluation is according to the NEPF. There are a lot of definitions that one could Google and get, but it is very important to look at what the NEPF describes as an evaluation. And of key here is that this definition focuses on the need to use applied research. It means it clarifies the difference between what you define as research and what is an evaluation. By the mere fact that it focuses on the systematic and objective generation of evidence, and it also outlines what the object of analysis or the unit of evaluation should be, which is the interventions as explained in that context. The other thing to note is that the definition emphasizes on the need for value judgment whenever you undertake an evaluation, with the aim of deriving recommendations either on to improve, to learn, to make decisions, as we'll elaborate a bit more on the next slide. So, colleagues, the NEPF looks at these 4 reasons. Prof. Bob, I don't know whether she left, or she's still around. It looks at this. This is what the NEPF says, that whenever you evaluate, you must evaluate for these reasons. Number 1, to generate knowledge for the purpose of learning on what works and what doesn't work based on the intervention of concern. The second one is to look at improving performance of the intervention. And then this is mainly for the purpose of informing the program managers as to what is it that performance monitoring is saying, and what is it that they can learn, and what decisions they should take as they implement the program. So it is used to provide a depth in terms of what performance monitoring actually presents to them. It can also be undertaken to improve accountability, looking at where taxpayers' money is going and whether there are returns on investment, as well as improve decision making in terms of deciding whether to continue or discontinue an intervention, or upscale an intervention, or fork in more budget on an intervention. So this will provide you with a platform where that should we continue to put money into this intervention which is clearly not working. So if you undertake an evaluation and you implement the results, you'll be able to make such decision. Colleagues, the NEPF also provides for various types of evaluations that could be undertaken alongside the results chain or causality, as it is often stated. And as you are aware, you can undertake a diagnostic evaluation prior to designing an evaluation. So the purpose of undertaking an evaluation here would be to identify the root causes and also to use the information generated through the diagnostic evaluation to design the intervention based on the alternatives that the diagnostic evaluation would provide for you. Because often we adopt interventions that are not evidence-based, and it results often to failure because they're not benchmarked on what's available out there. And or we don't know the root cause, but we are intervening on something that we are not aware of. So a diagnostic evaluation will assist in that instant. And thereafter you have adopted your intervention, or you have designed your theory of change as an intervention. You would do a design evaluation where you test the strength of the theory of change, whether is it likely to yield the results or goals that you would like to achieve through that intervention. And thereafter, during the implementation process, where inputs are turned into outputs, you can undertake an implementation evaluation. And this is an area where most of those that are within the M&E profession actually are more vested in the practice of performance monitoring, often called a tick box exercise for compliance purpose. So in most instances, when you talk about M&E, people know this process, which is just the process of turning inputs into outputs. So in that level of the results, you could look at undertaking an implementation evaluation using the performance monitoring information, because that information often tells you whether you are achieving your targets or not. So it's a reporting type of practice, which raises question, because it doesn't tell you that you are achieving because you're doing 1, 2, 3 right, or you are not achieving because you are not doing 1, 2, 3 right. So that's where an evaluation becomes important, for you to be able to dig deeper on what could be the reasons for the performance or the none thereof. So colleagues, the next evaluation that could be undertaken is an impact or outcome evaluation. I would like to class them together, because often politicians, they call for impact evaluations. And we tend to forgive them because they seem not to understand the difference between an outcome and an impact evaluation. Instead, when they say impact evaluation, they're actually talking about an outcome evaluation, which is the immediate outcome that you will see as soon as you have delivered on the intervention. But the impact evaluation would be undertaken in the long term, which needs you to allow the intervention space to do its magic. So colleagues, in that circle, as you can see from inputs to outcome, one could undertake an economic evaluation to look at the cost benefits and apply different methodologies to look at how the investment versus the benefits of what we have invested on. Now colleagues, this slide more or less refers to the previous, but the emphasis here is on locating evaluations within the policy cycle. Because there is a saying, for those that don't understand, that evaluations should be undertaken at the end. And this couldn't be further from the truth, because as you have noticed from the previous slides, you can do evaluations at the diagnosis stage or the design stage, where you are looking at the problem, analyzing the problem, and that's the diagnostic evaluation. After you have identified the problem, and the relevant intervention thereof, as you can see by the arrow there, You go to your planning. How are you going to operationalize the plan? How are you going to go about implementing? Then you can also do a design evaluation there, as you can see. And then we go to the implementation and monitoring part, which I've alluded to. There you do your implementation evaluation. And now the famous evaluation that is often spoken about, that's where you do your outcome and impact evaluation. So, colleagues, the NEPF makes emphasis on the need to align evaluation with planning and budgeting processes. So it requires that in this instant, evaluations should be prioritized and linked to the plans of institutions. Now, of recently with the current framework, the gender responsive planning, monitoring, evaluation, and auditing framework has been brought in with the attempt of looking at issues of inequality, gender inequality, women empowerment, and issues of the marginalized. So this tries to integrate evaluation with mainstreaming, gender mainstreaming. And there is a guideline that our colleagues will talk to during the breakaway session in the afternoon on gender responsive evaluations. Now, colleagues, there are different approaches that the NEPF proposes that could be undertaken. One of them is the sector review, which looks at assessing the systems, the plans within a specific sector to look at issues of alignment, whether are those plans well aligned to can deliver on its mandate. The other approach that is proposed is the rapid evaluations, which is the opposite of your traditional evaluations, the 12 months to sometimes 3 years, 2 years that we tend to do. So these rapid evaluations are beneficial because they can be undertaken in a short space of time. 3 to 6 months, according to the guideline, is the proposed timeline. And they tend to be beneficial because of they are often less costly and uses flexible methods. So they can be undertaken to inform decision making and also guide the design of a full-scale evaluation if there's a need, but decisions can still be taken based on their results. So there goes the gender responsive evaluation that needs to be embedded as well in the designs. Now, colleagues, the NEPF acknowledges that we are operating under a resource-constrained environment, and as a result, provide mechanisms for optimizing limited capacity. And one of those mechanisms is that technical evaluation support should be provided to state institutions based on the mandate of each layer of the institution. So I've highlighted structured support there by DPME, and the next slides I'm going to dwell deeper on that because DPME is expected often to be everywhere, and that couldn't be further from the truth, colleague. The support that we are requested to provide by the NEPF is actually structured. The other mechanism is to promote sustainable learning through learning by doing. That means institution needs to start doing for them to learn, get their hands dirty. It also provides for decentralized training, and I must indicate the DPME has quite a number of courses that are there or that have been designed and implemented through the NSG. And we continuously go around presenting to build capacity and to also provide clarity where there's a need. Colleagues, the other mechanism is to ensure that whenever we outsource evaluations, we include an element of capacity development in the SLA. So that service providers, they don't just do evaluation in isolation, but you as the evaluation or M&E unit are actually capacitated in each process of undertaking the evaluation. We also look at using existing government resources in undertaking the data collection if the evaluation is undertaken internally. And the issue of partnerships and collaboration is emphasized in the NEPF. So universities should be brought on board, M&E associations, the SAMIA. Let's capitalize on those partnerships, colleagues, so that we can capacitate the system. Now, the structured support that DPM is required to provide to state institutions is actually limited to national departments, national SOEs, Office of the Premiers, and national DCOC. I say this, colleagues, because the expectation is that these spheres of government are actually expected to establish the system at those levels, with the DPME continuously providing technical support in terms of knowledge sharing platforms like the BBLs that we usually do, as well as ensuring that we avail ourselves to serve in the various technical committees, as well as ensuring that we are there whenever we are requested to present like today. So we are supposed to assist in actually maintaining the system while those spheres or institutions are able to run and continuously build capacity at that level. So now, the DPME is currently re-looking at the current arrangement because it has been left out without attending to it for a long time, and due to the environment we are in, we are unable to respond effectively as we should. So we are looking into a mechanism to outline the parameters of support. There's a talk of engaging or entering into memorandum of understanding with the different spheres of government that we are required to support to deal with issues of expectation and ad hoc requests for support. Colleagues, the National Evaluation Policy Framework requires that evaluation plans should be in place for all the spheres of government as indicated in the first slides of applicability of the NEPF. And we have done quite a lot in terms of institutionalizing at national level and to some extent departmental level. So there are plans there that we can account for. But currently as it is, we are yet to institutionalize evaluation at local government and SOEs. As such, those sectors or spheres of government are required to have evaluation plans so that they can prioritize the evaluations that they would like to undertake for a set period of time, which is a 3 to 5 year period based on the requirements. And the plans can be reviewed as and when needed. So, as I've indicated, colleagues, when I started, the DPME is required to set standards for evaluations to ensure that the system runs itself, to also ensure that there are additional tools to complement what the NEPF actually requires to be done in undertaking evaluation within the system. So this will provide or ensure that we have quality and credible evaluations that encourage use to inform decision making. There's some changes on my screen, I don't know. Should I close this? Okay, there we go. I hope I'm not disturbing at the back there. colleagues, to date, we have developed 25 guidelines and 9 templates. And in the afternoon, my colleagues will speak into some of these guidelines, as you can see on the program, to kind of make you aware of how to develop your terms of reference or your concept notes, how to commission and manage evaluations, you know, both whenever you are doing them through service providers and doing them in-house. Okay, I don't know what's happening here, but I'll just check there. My slides are gone here. Okay. Okay, so these are the guidelines, colleagues, that are on the pipeline in the current financial year, and I thought I should take this opportunity to present them to you just to make you aware, of where we are in terms of standard setting. And I'm pleased to also announce that we are currently working on an evaluation quality assurance framework, which will assist in ensuring that institutions of the state are aware of which guidelines to look out for whenever they are busy with evaluation, because sometimes it becomes difficult to use frameworks, or the guidelines, if they are segmented and then different documents. You don't even know whether the guideline exists or it doesn't exist. So the framework seeks to solve that problem. Colleagues, now in terms of institutionalizing evaluations at local government, the NEPF requires that an implementation plan should be in place to guide the process of institutionalizing evaluations. And the DPME has developed a phased approach to institutionalize evaluation. A draft implementation plan is in place, and we have consulted on it broadly in partnership with National DCOC. And currently, we are busy with a lot of work to finalize the plan before or in the first quarter of the financial year. So this slide just attempts to provide you with progress on what we have done to date on the plan, because these things are happening concurrently. We're not waiting for the plan, but we are already doing some work on institutionalizing evaluations. So at national level, as I've indicated, there has been ongoing engagements. The plan was presented at National M&E Forum, which was organized by National COCTA. And we have used inputs from that M&E Forum to improve the plan. And at provincial level, we continue to establish relationship. For an example, last week we were in the Eastern Cape. They held their first evaluation seminar by the COCTA, not OTP. Really impressed. KZN, I saw the colleagues from COCTA, GP, Gauteng, and Limpopo. So we still continue to engage on how to assist. So the approach that we are adopting, colleagues, is institutionalizing based on interest and need. Because evaluations are not forced down people's throats. But we need to approach a supply-demand approach, because it's not going to help to force people to use evaluations if there's no will to do so. Now, at municipal level, there has been various presentations that are undertaken for the purpose of awareness and as well as building interest, as I've indicated. And of recently, we have had a theory of change training with various metros, which was held end of Feb, beginning of March this year. and we had 22 officials who were trained. So now, what we're doing currently, colleagues, we have initiated a capacity needs development assessment, which a service provider has been appointed and currently undertaking that capacity needs assessment. And we hope that by the end of April, we'll have the report to also strengthen the implementation plan. Now, at SOEs, the National Evaluation Policy Frameworks requires that there should be a needs assessment study that is undertaken to inform the process of institutionalizing. And this should be done or be led by partner departments or your mother departments, which are supposed to provide capacity development on evaluations at the different SOEs that they are responsible for. But just to give progress, colleagues, the DPME continues to provide technical support based on requests, as I've indicated, which are ad hoc requests currently where we are. Because I must indicate that most of various SOEs and SOCs actually do undertake evaluations. They need to standardize and to bring them in as per the mandate of the NAPF. And it will take the mother department to rise to the occasion and work with DPME to provide guidelines and set standards that are appropriate for those SOEs and SOCs. Colleague, this is the end of my presentation. Thank you.
Let's give him again another round of applause. Thank you very much. You finished 4 minutes before your time. I think we allocated a lot of time, Mr. Setwaba. Thank you very much for your presentation.